Right. All righty. Hey, animal allies. All right. I'm going to wait just a minute for folks to join us. But how is everybody? What's happening in your part of the world? Please say hello. And what activism did you participate in this week? Go ahead and feel free to share in the comments, and we will get started with our program in just a minute. But while we're waiting, I want to mention the big news. I'm sure you've all heard it in the animal rights sphere this week. It's official. The world's most influential fashion publication, Vogue magazine, and its parent company, Condé Nast, have confirmed that they will no longer feature new fur in any of their publications, either for content or advertising. This marks a cultural turning point and sends the rest of the fashion world a powerful message that killing animals for fur is not only unethical, but it also no longer in style. This win comes after a campaign of over 100 protests against Condé Nast, Vogue, and Mattel. AAC is still celebrating, and we thank every individual and grassroots group that put in the effort. There is still work to be done to end the fur industry, but this is monumental progress for the animals. The win is shared with our longtime colleagues at Coalition to Abolish the Fur Trade, CAFT, and Abolish Fur Worldwide, AFW. But the win truly belongs to all of us and to the animals. So feel free to comment how you're feeling, if you are still juiced up and revved up from this win this week, and any of your thoughts on that. But welcome to another AAC live stream program. In this live stream, Anita, the vegan mindset coach, is going to cover how to effectively communicate with non-vegans. So we were having some volume microphone issues before we started, folks. So do comment in the YouTube comment section if you can hear me okay, or if my microphone's going up and down, and I apologize for that. But before we start our program, my name is Michelle Granberg. I'm the education content host for AAC. For those new to AAC, AAC was created to help activists to be more effective by equipping them with the tools, community, and resources they need to boldly participate in our global animal liberation movement. Founded in 2020, AAC offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. You can apply today to become a mentor or mentee through our website, which we will be putting in the comment section. Plus, we are more than a mentorship program. We offer free educational live streams and online trainings. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person collaborative events, activism events around the country. AEC is a support system and a resource designed to empower grassroots activism. And in case you missed it, we just announced our New York Fur Free Weekend, November 27th through the 30th, 4 days of action. We'll put the link tree in the comments, and we certainly hope that you plan to join us for that. All right, so I get to pass it over to our guest teacher, Anita. She is a former veterinarian and sustainability professional who made the connection between animal rights, environment, and social justice. She now dedicates her life to help fellow vegans survive and thrive in a non-vegan world. So we can be powerful advocates for this movement, so we can take care of ourselves, so we can be there for the animals. All right, so questions will be welcome, but please hold them until the end of Anita's presentation, and keep your questions on topic for tonight. Okay, Anita, go right ahead and take it from here.
Thank you, Michelle. It's so great to be here, everyone. Really, really pleased to be able to share this with you. So today I've been asked to talk about why communicating with non-vegans can be so frustrating and hard, and what are the things that are within our power to do about that. So I am actually going to share my presentation. So if you bear with me for 2 moments while I just share that screen. There we go. Okay, here we go. I've saved it as a PDF, so nothing could possibly go wrong. Okay, so the question I was asked is, okay, can you tell us about why communicating with non-vegans is so frustrating and so hard? And I just want to start off by saying is I recognize that all of us here are activists. And so in our activism, whatever form we choose to engage in, there are usually protocols and scripts and particular approaches that we're taught to do, and that tend to be very effective in those particular settings. So whether it's protests or disruptions or other forms, and the people who put those together are always tweaking them to make them more effective. And so that tends to work really well for us in those settings. But outside of those settings, when we go to our day jobs, when we engage with the non-vegan community, in our families and our families of origins, when we try to put into practice some of those same skills and approaches of sharing information, holding people accountable, that tends to often fail. And then we run into this issue of finding it really frustrating and difficult to get through, often to the people we feel like we should know the best and have the most in common with. And so that's what I'm here to address today. And I'm hoping that some of the skills and tools and learnings that I bring might also possibly translate into some of the activism settings. So the more formalized activism settings, you might be able to draw some of these skills and tools into that to also make you more effective in some of those settings. And I'm thinking particularly in those one-on-one street outreach type of situations for those of us who are engaged in that type of activism. So these 4 diagrams represent to me broadly the reasons why we find it so frustrating when we're dealing with people one-on-one. And the first is that they don't listen. So my first little diagram just represents a person who's definitely not listening to us. And so we could take a look at these things, these reasons why we find it so frustrating, and say, well, it's all their fault. We could blame the other person for not listening and so on, but it's really not helpful, because when we place the blame entirely on the other person, it gives us no agency and no power. We end up feeling almost as victimized as the animals that we're trying to defend. So I'm going to go through each of these things, and I'm going to actually talk about how we contribute to each of these frustrations that we experience. So the first reason is non-vegans don't listen to us, okay? And so why don't they listen to us? And I'm going to suggest that it is because the truth hurts. Right. So when we share information, particularly that may be distressing information with them, that creates a great deal of discomfort for them. And sometimes they just don't really know how to handle it, because the vast majority of people consider themselves to be good people with good values who care about animals and would never intentionally hurt them. So when they're hearing about the horror and the suffering that their everyday actions are causing, it creates this tremendous amount of discomfort. We call it cognitive dissonance. And often their first reaction is, no, don't tell me anymore. I don't want to hear it. It's a self-protective mechanism. It doesn't mean that they are selfish or that they're cowards. It just means that in the moment, they don't know how to cope with it any other way. Okay. So they want to be able to keep believing that they are good people who don't hurt animals. So it's the easiest way for them to do that is simply to block out our message. Okay. Now, the second thing that frustrates us is they won't change. So they won't do what we want them to do. Okay, so even if they've heard our message and that cognitive dissonance is raised and they would like to maybe bring their actions into alignment with their values, that that thought of change is scary. And the discomfort of where they are now, sitting in their cognitive dissonance, is still less uncomfortable than the thought of what they believe they will face if they try to go vegan. Because, of course, we keep telling them it's not just about the food, it's everything, right? So, yeah, now you're going to have to think about not only every single item that you buy at the supermarket and you order at a restaurant, but every piece of clothing you buy, every other product, your cosmetics, your entertainment. It's a whole of lifestyle change. And not only is it the lifestyle, but it's now how they're going to fit in with the rest of society, how they're going to fit in with their friendship groups, their colleagues, their families, right? All the same things that we have experienced ourselves. The thought of all of that can be overwhelming to people. So even if they're starting to think that they want to change, this can stop them in their tracks. Okay. So the third thing that frustrates us is that they argue with us, right? They push back and they argue. And why do they do that? Well, as I said, the thought of that change is scary and uncomfortable for them. And so it's actually easier and less energy intensive for them to push back and find reasons to make us wrong to justify not changing than it is to go ahead and face whatever it is that they need to do to change. Okay. The other thing is they also often see us, and let's face it, when we're sitting in dystopia, that anguish of being vegan in a non vegan world, we can come across as angry, as miserable, um, depressed. There are so many sort of negative ways in which they can see us. And unfortunately, all of these emotional reactions we have to the non-vegan world are perfectly normal for a person who's seen the truth. On the downside is it can often make us not the best ambassadors for veganism, particularly for the people who've seen us change from non-vegan to vegan, and they may have observed our change in demeanor and how we experience the world and how much less joy we often feel. And they look at us and go, you know what, I don't want to go through what you're going through. And also, I don't want to be treated the way that you are by the non-vegan world. Okay. Then the other thing that happens that causes them to argue back against us is once we've tried to make them listen and we've asked them to change and they refuse, we start to judge them. Right. So often we can't help it. We start to judge them as, cowardly or selfish, and a few other unhelpful things, morally, ethically inferior to ourselves. So we start to view them with contempt. And you know what, people, they pick up on that judgment. They can sense our contempt and they feel shamed and they feel guilted and they resent that. So they push back. So they find reasons for objecting to not only veganism but to us. So really what they're objecting to is the way that they believe we make them feel. Then they will pin it on the veganism, and so they will go and find evidence or alternative facts to support their view that veganism is in some way bad or harmful, right? That's when we start to get the whole plants have feelings, but protein, but worse for the environment and all the rest of it, right? This is where all those silly cherry-picked internet-based arguments start coming out. When we try to argue and convince, it just tends to create more and more resistance from them. Okay. And then the final thing that makes it really frustrating dealing with non-vegans is sometimes they give us a hard time. right? So this can look either like nagging, we perceive as nagging, often from the people who care about us, who might be genuinely concerned about the change that we've exhibited in ourselves after going vegan. They may be concerned about our physical health or our emotional health, or the impact that this change is going to have on our life more broadly. So this might look like, for example, my dad, shortly after I went vegan, he was very concerned. He said, "You're going to die. This is really bad for you, right? I just heard there was a vegan athlete. He dropped dead on the running track, and they say it was because he ate too much soy. Now you've replaced meat with soy, you know that's going to happen to you, right?" So he was genuinely concerned. Now that was 8 years ago, and since then, he's come to realize that that's not going to eventuate. But he was genuinely concerned in trying to talk me out of my silly dietary choice as he saw it at the time. So we're going to get that from people who care about us. We're also going to get ridicule and bullying from others. And the reason why they do that is because, of course, the mere presence of a vegan makes them aware of their cognitive dissonance. So the fact that we are perfectly capable of not consuming animals brings to their attention the fact that their choice to eat animals is in fact a choice. It's not just normal, natural, and necessary the way that the system has taught us our entire lives, but it is actually a choice that they're making of their own free will. And now, as people who view themselves as good, kind people who've never intentionally hurt an animal, they've got to reconcile with the fact that they're choosing to do that every day. And so we make them very uncomfortable through our mere existence. And so the way they make themselves feel better is by making us seem ridiculous, right? So by making us the out group. And of course, we are in the minority. So it's very easy for folks like this to gang up on us with the majority, to make fun and to ridicule, get everyone laughing at us. It makes us the weirdo, and therefore it justifies them in not becoming like us. Okay, so to me, that captures in a nutshell why we experience so much frustration dealing with non-vegans every day. They don't listen, they won't do what we want, they will argue back against our points, and they will often isolate and make us feel like the weirdo outsider. Okay, so that's really, really frustrating. And so I mentioned at the beginning that we have power in the situation. We contribute to creating the situation for ourselves. And that's not to blame ourselves, because there's no point in blaming anybody. But if we can accept responsibility for our part in creating this situation, then that also means we have power to change it. So what I want to outline here is what it is specifically that we do, where we go wrong to create this frustrating situation for ourselves. And so there are 4 key things that we do. And most of us do this just naturally. It is unfortunately also what works in a lot of forms of activism, like protest. So what we tend to do is we lead with information. We say, hey, here's the information you don't know, that if you knew, surely you would change. And it can work really well in the public domain when we put the information out there and it moves public opinion, and now governments and companies like Vogue start to change what they do because they lose their social license when the information that's been hidden is revealed. Works really well in those kinds of situations. Unfortunately, in the one-on-one, in the personal interactions, what tends to happen is that when we're leading with information, we tend to share the thing that we find most compelling. Maybe the thing that caused us to become vegan, the tipping point. For me, it was dairy calves and recognizing what happens to them. So that would be what I would naturally want to lead with and share with other people, because I'm like, that was the most compelling thing for me. Surely people who are in my life, who I identify with, my friends, my family, they're going to be compelled by the same things. So we assume that what led us to change will also lead them to change. And unfortunately, that's often not the case, right? So it might be that the thing that was most compelling to us was simply just not the most compelling thing for them in relation to connecting with animals. But often, even if they're able to hear and understand and empathize with animals, the thing that is most concerning to them is something else. It might be their health. Right. So at this point, I want to share an example of a friend of mine who was having some serious health struggles and had been having those struggles for a couple of decades. So they were chronic and they were significantly affecting this person's daily life. And they were just struggling to live a normal life as a result. And they called me up and were sharing the difficulties. They'd been to doctors who couldn't help, and they were feeling rather stuck. And this was probably in the first year after I'd gone vegan myself. And now I could have chosen to listen to them, sympathize with them, and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry you're going through these struggles," and listen to them, and then gone, "Oh, okay, now let's talk about me. I've gone vegan, and I've learned all these things, and I want to share them with you because I think if you knew, you'd be horrified and you'd want to change too for the animals." Right? I could have led with what was most compelling to me. Luckily, at the time, what I chose to do was I listened to what was her biggest, most compelling pain point at the time, her greatest limitation, which was her health. And I said, look, I can't guarantee anything, but I've been doing some reading and it seems that a whole food plant-based diet can be helpful with the kind of thing that you're going through. Um, and and then that gave me an in with this person, right? Because if I had led with the animal situation, she might have said, "That's terrible. I'm so distressed by that. And I wish I could do something about it. But right now, I'm in the situation with my health. I'm struggling to cope with everyday life. I can't face taking on a massive lifestyle change where I have to throw out all the food, buy everything new, think about all the products. It's just so overwhelming right now. I'm just struggling to cope." So that would have been her response. But because I said to her, "Look, there's a chance," she grabbed it. She grabbed the opportunity that maybe a plant based diet could actually help her. And she took that opportunity and she ran with it. And 7 years later, she's vegan. Right. Initially, she changed for her health, but with a little bit of support along the way, she has found her way to veganism. Had I tried to lead with the animal side of things, I think I would have left both her without help, but also with another vegan in the world and the impact that she's going on to have. So that was the first thing that we do is we lead with information, and often it's not the right information for the person. And the other thing that we do is we try to convince, right? So when they don't respond well to our information, we push a little bit harder. We're like, "Okay, well, let me get some more facts. If that wasn't the right thing, let me find another thing." And then they start to, of course, push back, like I described before. And now it becomes this debate and this argument and this exchange of alternative facts between us. And the fact that we're right doesn't really help. It now just devolves into an argument. And then, as I said earlier, we start to judge them when clearly they don't seem to be caring about the animals. We start to have these judgments and feel contempt, and that then really triggers their defense. And now there starts to be some animosity. Right? As we try to hold them accountable, they start to think, "Well, how dare you?" Right. So now we're triggering their defense systems. And as we get more and more frustrated, what a lot of us resort to, and I know I've done this, is we start to really, let's use the word force information on them, right? You don't want to listen, too bad. I'm going to talk over the top of you and I'm going to tell you anyway, or I'm going to send you some very graphic and distressing material, because if you won't listen voluntarily, then I'm going to make you listen and I'm going to shock you out of your complacency. That's kind of where we start to go, when we get very frustrated with people not listening and arguing back. And unfortunately, what happens is when we force information on people, whether it is graphic visual images or even descriptions, which often just simply the description of something terrible can be even more impactful because the imagination is so powerful in creating those images, that person can feel really violated. When we give them information that they have not given permission to receive, they can feel violated and they can start to feel emotionally unsafe around us. They can start no longer trusting that we will hold them in a safe space. And now we're distancing and losing relationships, sometimes with people that we have been very close to for much of our lives. So these are the 4 things that we tend to naturally do wrong. Okay. And these are, I'm sure you're noticing that these are things that tend to work well in a lot of activism settings, particularly in the protest and disruption type of sphere. So leading with information, trying to convince them, triggering their defenses, and then distancing and losing those relationships. Okay. So this is how we contribute to creating this situation that frustrates us and doesn't work. So let's move into talking about communicating strategically so that we actually have the impact that we want to have and start moving people towards becoming vegan, even if not in a single step. So, what does this involve? So, what communicating strategically looks like is flipping this thing on its head, basically reversing it. It's as simple as that. What have we been doing wrong? How do we flip that around to be effective? Okay, so instead of leading with information, we need to lead with curiosity. When we're engaging with people one on one, sometimes even in that street outreach situation, even if we only have 5 minutes with them, we can still go through this process. So, leading with curiosity, which is basically finding out who this person is and what matters to them. And even if it's a person that you've known your entire life, if it's a close family member, it's amazing how over time we stop listening and stop understanding who they are and what really truly matters to them. What are their values and what matters to them right now? What's their big pain point? So stepping into curiosity is really about listening more than sharing. It's aiming to understand before aiming to be understood. Okay. So when we step into our curiosity, what that means is we not only listen, but we start asking powerful questions. Based on what we hear people saying, we can follow their train of thought to understand, what do they really value? What's most important to them right now? What does it mean to them? Right? What is their pain point? What is the thing that if we could help them resolve by helping them move closer to their to alignment between their behaviors and their values as good people who don't want to hurt animals, how can we match that up with also easing their pain point? This is where we get curious and start wondering about this and asking questions. So these questions not only reveal a lot about the person and what they're going to need to help them to move towards veganism, but it also tells us their knowledge gaps, where they've been misinformed, where they've bought into myths and disinformation, because there's so much of it out there, right? So as we listen to them, we find these things out. Now we're equipped to know how to best help them towards moving in the right direction. Okay, so the next step is, instead of judgment and arguing, we choose compassion. And so I've used compassion really here to symbolize 2 things. One is that we allow ourselves to step into empathy with them, because through our curiosity, we've now understood them a lot better. We're able to step into their shoes, see the world through their eyes, and feel their feelings, right? Or at least understand how they feel. And that then makes it much easier for us to want to help them rather than judge them. Okay. So can you see how that creates a very different feeling towards them within us, and a very different intent in how we want to approach them? So compassion, I've chosen that word to represent this step because compassion means to suffer with. And for me, compassion is the combination of empathy and the desire to help. So having understood who this person is about, what their pain points are and what's going to help them, we can now offer something in return. So this is the point at which we express our compassion by first of all saying, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. I understand your fears and your difficulties. And then we get to share something relevant from our own story. Because if we've listened with curiosity, we will have identified something shared with this person when we can say to them, and I'm going to use that example of my friend with a health problem, right? And I actually did this. I said,
Hey, Anita.
look, oh, yes,
I don't
sorry.
want to interrupt you, but it looks like you haven't advanced to the next slide on our end.
Oh, okay. So you're not seeing the slide that says communicating strategically and
No, we're still
curiosity,
on
compassion, and permission?
where we go wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, Michelle. That's so strange. Okay. You know what? Bear with me a second. I'm going to stop sharing it for just a moment and I'm going to reshare. I'm going to, on my end, I'm going to flip it onto the next slide and then I'm going to share that again. That's very odd that it hasn't advanced. Okay. Technology. Okay. Let me see if you can see that one now. Has that gone on to communicating strategically?
It's coming up. Takes a second or two, I think. Still waiting.
All good. Hey, listen, if I need to, I can do the rest of it without the slides. You'll just have to be looking at my face while I talk. I do find the diagrams quite helpful, though, as an illustration.
It's still not coming up, but I think it will. Because before it took.
I'm happy to keep talking to it regardless while we wait.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Okay, because I think you'll still get the
crossed.
benefit. And I'm super happy to share this slideshow if anyone literally wants it as a reminder afterwards. Happy to share it as well. It's just in a PDF form. So I've talked about stepping into curiosity, and then the next step is compassion. And we demonstrate that by showing our understanding and sharing something from our own past that allows them to see that we've had a similar experience. So we've got a shared background or experience, which establishes our credibility with them, right? So it says, hey, this person actually really genuinely understands me and they know what they're talking about. So with my friend with a health issue, who I chose not to lead with the animals, but I focused in on her pain point, which was her terrible health struggles. I said to her, look, I know it's not the same thing, but I used to have this health issue. It was called a post-nasal drip, where every night the mucus from my sinuses, apologies for the oversharing, would drip down into my airways and I would wake up with a lung full of mucus. I'd be coughing up all morning and it was horrible. And I got referred to a specialist and they told me there was nothing really they could do to prevent it other than I would have to be spraying cortisone up my nose for the rest of my life, every single day. And that's what I did until I went vegan and the post-nasal drip stopped just like that. Now, it wasn't something I expected. It just happened. Subsequently reading up on it, I figured out it was probably something to do with dairy, some kind of sensitivity or allergy. And so that's my little story. So I said to her, look, so that happened for me. That was a chronic inflammatory problem I was dealing with. You're dealing with a chronic inflammatory problem. It's different, but you never know. It might just help for you as well to go plant-based. Right. So now I've demonstrated that I understand her struggle and I've offered her the glimpse of a possibility for change by shifting towards veganism. Okay, so Michelle, I'm just going to ask you, has that slide appeared yet?
Yeah, the slide we see now is the communicating strategically slide. I don't know if you're on the next slide.
No, that's fine. So the one that I'm showing at the moment is the one that says curiosity, compassion, and permission.
Yes, correct. Awesome.
Perfect. Good. That's still where I am. So this is what I'm calling the 3-step dance of strategic communication, where we're trying to have those shifting conversations with vegans. So start with curiosity, step into compassion, demonstrate your understanding, your credibility, and give them a glimpse of possibility. Okay, the next step is permission. So this is where we flip that forcing of information on its head and we actually ask for permission to share. Now, the great thing is that when we've used our curiosity and our compassion, people tend to be very much ready to give us the permission to receive the information they actually need to help them to change. So now we know what they need. We know what is going to be the most helpful to offer them. And it might be multiple things, right? So with my friend, I said, I've got some resources. Would you like me to send them to you? And she said, yes, please. So I sent them to her, and because she was primed for it, she absorbed that and she took it on board. She was welcoming it. So when we ask for permission and people give us that permission, not only do they invite the information, but they also give a little bit of a micro consent to the content. So in advance, they're primed to actually be open to it. They're much more likely to open that link, actually have a read, and seriously consider what it is that's contained within. And so the thing that we share might be, I'm going to advance to the next slide. Has that advanced for you guys?
Yes, it has. Yep.
Oh, all right.
Yay!
So lovely. So once we've got that permission to share, then we can offer, the information that we know they were missing. So if they were misled, so let's say, for example, they'd said earlier, well, I'm okay with dairy because the cow doesn't have to die to produce that milk, right? Then I know that they've got a knowledge gap. So I might say to them, hey, would you be willing to see what does need to happen for cows to produce milk for our consumption, right? And then they'll be like, yeah, sure. Then I can share that, dairy is scary video or whatever it is that they might need to see. They might need some resources. So that's the middle diagram is representing resources. So with the example of my friend, I not only sent her links to the various sort of plant-based doctors talking about the thing that she was dealing with, I also got on Amazon and I sent her a Dr. Michael Greger's How Not to Die cookbook to help her get started. So we can choose, depending on how close we are to this person, how invested we are in them, we can choose what kind of resources we're prepared to send them. And of course, we can offer them direct support. So if this is a friend in our daily lives, or even a colleague, someone we care about, a family member, we might want to go as far as to physically help them with whatever they need to do. We might go to their house on a weekend and help them clean out their pantry. We might go shopping with them and help them find alternative products. We might help them to veganize current recipes. So that's the kind of support I'm talking about. So we can choose to offer information, resources, and supports. Okay, so once we've done this, what happens next? The reality is that from a single contact, the vast majority of people won't go vegan in a single step. Most people will move some way. They'll start to reduce their animal consumption. They might go vegetarian. That's fine. So what happens is we shift them as far as we can with our little 3-step dance, and then we'll see where they arrive, and then we just get to repeat that process again. I won't go back a slide in case it messes things up. I think that's where things might have gone wrong before when I flicked back one slide. So we get to repeat that 3-step dance of curiosity, compassion, permission, and we get to gradually move them along that line. Now, this might not work with a person that we've met one time and had that one-off interaction. We might need to accept that we have moved that person as far as we're going to be able to, and there'll be another person later on who they will meet who will move them along that next step. We need to trust that when we're not in that person's life in an ongoing way. But if these people are in our lives, if they're our family, our friends, and our colleagues, we get to keep helping them incrementally towards that shift. I know that many of us activists feel really, really strongly that they should, A, do it for the animals. If they're not doing it for the animals, it's not the right reason. And B, that if they don't go vegan in one single step, they're not doing enough. And I think this is a big part of where we do go wrong, and we actually repel people from veganism. When they find it just so daunting and so overwhelming to go all in one step, and we say to them, it's either all in or you're not good enough. If you're not vegan, you're an animal abuser. That tends to turn them right around and back off. Okay, that nobody wants to feel shamed or judged. So I think this is where we need to work on ourselves and our own mindset and understand that if we support people along that path, they will continue to move in the right direction. Even if at some point they stop and decide, maybe they will decide, I've gone as far as vegetarian and I feel I've done enough. I don't want to go any further. Well, you know what? They're still reducing their impact compared to what they were doing before. And the fact is that even people who say that, I've gone far enough, I'm vegetarian, I'm not going any further, those people are still far more likely to, at some point, proceed to being vegan than the people who never even went to vegetarian in the first place. We need to recognize that and work with it. And I'm speaking as a person who was vegetarian for 10 whole years and in denial, thinking I was doing enough before finally that dairy calf got to me. So there is always hope for every person. Now it's up to you to decide how long you want to stick around, how much energy and resources you want to invest in an individual person and helping them move along that path. At some point, you might decide if they've got to vegetarian and they're not interested in shifting further, you might want to back off. You might want to let someone else take them on the next step of their journey. But if this is a person who you care a lot about or who is going to remain in your daily life regardless, and I've now progressed to the next slide, so I'm hoping that's working for you guys. The next part of communicating strategically is these next 3 steps. So let's say they've got to that point and they've said, okay, I'm vegetarian, I'm not going any further, and you've decided you want to keep this person around. You're also not happy with the fact that they're still consuming animal products. It's having an impact on you. So the next thing that's available to us is using or taking advantage of the fact that attitude follows behavior. So what that means, and I'll give it to you in a nutshell now, and then I'll talk through these 3 additional steps on the slide. I'm hoping you can see them. What attitude follows behavior means. Oh, can you see them, Michelle?
Yep, we can see them.
Beautiful, thank you. What I mean by attitude follows behavior is that when we can get people to change their behavior in just certain settings, even if it's just for our benefit in just those specific times, when that behavior changes, their attitude starts to get dragged behind, as in it shifts along with it. Okay, I'm going to talk through it now. Let's start with vulnerable conversations. So let's say this person has said, I'm going vegetarian, not doing anything further. You're just going to have to be okay with that. I feel I'm doing enough. And this is a person who matters to us and we want to keep in our lives. The next thing we can do is have a vulnerable conversation. So a vulnerable conversation is having an open discussion or a sharing of our internal experience. So now we're not talking about the animals or trying to shift them. This is not about them. This becomes about us. This is where we share openly and vulnerably without judgment or blame the impact that we experience from whatever it is that we experience with them. So an example might be, let's say it's the friend who's gone vegetarian and they're continuing to have eggs and dairy in our presence. And we find that upsetting or distressing. We find it frustrating. So a vulnerable conversation might look like this. Excuse me. It might look like this. We say to them, when we eat together and I see you consuming eggs or dairy, animal products, my mind can't help but go to the suffering of those animals that produce those products. I can't help but see what happens to them. And when my mind goes there, I feel distressed. I feel upset. I feel their pain. And when I'm in that state of emotion, I find it very difficult to be present with you because I'm occupied now managing my mind and my emotions around what it is that I'm seeing. I'm not truly present with you. I'm not really hearing what you're saying. I'm not really fully engaged in our conversation at that time. And the result for me of this is a distancing in our relationship, because when I spend time with you, a lot of that time is spent dealing with upset and distress. And that's what I walk away with. And so this for me is having a negative impact on our relationship. I don't want this. I want us to be close and connected. I want us to feel the way, that we used to. That is a vulnerable conversation. It's sharing what's happening, the impact on us without blaming them, and stating what we would like instead in terms of, I don't want this for our relationship. I want us to be close and connected. Okay, that's the sum total of a vulnerable conversation. Now, the people who care about us, they will very often make the next logical step. They will understand that if we're experiencing distress in their presence as a result of their behavior, they will often say, well, obviously, in a lot of cases, it will just make sense to them to say, oh, okay, I understand you're distressed by my consuming animal products. Look, when I'm with you, I'll simply choose to eat plant-based with you. How about that? So a lot of people will offer this upright. That's fine. Not everyone's that smart. Not everyone figures it out. Some people might say, well, what can I do about it? Okay. And that's when we go to the next step. We can make an explicit request for what it is that we need from them for us to feel close and connected and want to maintain this relationship. So this is where we get to make that request. And we get to say, hey, so what I'm going to ask, in the interest of our relationship and our closeness and connection, is that when we eat together, that you choose plant-based food with me, and I can help you choose the nicest plant-based food to have. Or if that doesn't work for you, then I suggest that we don't catch up around food, that we go for a walk or focus our meetings on something other than food and drink. Okay, so that's a request. And then they get to choose whether they comply with that request or not. They can say, yep, sure, I get that now, I totally will do it. When they do, when they start changing their behavior for us, they actually get to feel good about themselves. They don't feel like they're being controlled, they feel like the hero. And when they actually start changing that behavior, when they're choosing to eat plant-based with us, the human mind can't help but justify the actions that the person is taking. So in a sneaky kind of way, we're gradually shifting their attitude towards veganism. Attitude follows behavior. They start justifying it to themselves, justifying it to other people. Before you know it, they start sending you pictures of when they're eating out at restaurants, of their plant-based food that they're choosing voluntarily when you're not even there, or the new plant-based recipe they've found that they're going to try that they want to share with you as well. This is what we start to see as we ask people to change their behavior just for us, out of kindness for us, right? This is where they do it voluntarily. They don't feel like being forced. Now, some people will take our request and say, no, you know what? You're not going to make me do anything. I'm sorry that you're feeling distressed, but that's your thing. You just need to manage your own mind and your emotions. I'm going to keep eating eggs and dairy. That might be what they say to us. Now, if they do, the final tool left in our tool belt is setting boundaries. So boundaries are a firm line that we set for ourselves that we do not allow to be crossed. So in this particular instance, our boundary might be that we will not share a meal with a person who's consuming animal products. And so what we get to do at this point is we get to say to the person, hey, I respect that. You have a free choice. What you're doing is legal. So there's nothing I can do to stop you, and I'm not going to try to force you to change, but just letting you know that I need to protect my own emotional well-being. And I'm not prepared to keep feeling distress every time I sit down to eat with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, going forward, choose to no longer eat with you. Okay, and if we're together and you bring out some animal-based food, I'm going to get up and leave. That's my boundary. So a boundary is never about controlling the other person's behavior. It's about protecting our own emotional well-being. And some people might choose to get upset and view it as you trying to control them. But trust me, if you actually uphold that boundary, which means you take the action you say you're going to take, it means you don't go to meals with them, you get up and leave when they pull out the animal products, over time, they will come to respect you as somebody who's in integrity, as somebody who doesn't let other people walk all over their boundaries. Okay, so the boundary is the last thing left in our tool belt. So let me advance to the next slide. Just very quickly, I just want to give you a couple of reasons for giving this approach a go. First is when we get communication right, reaching people feels effortless, enjoyable, and connecting. Okay. When we do these things, that's how relationships with non-vegans can actually feel. And very importantly, when we can connect with them in this way, our relationships actually do grow closer and improve. We both feel better about each other and towards each other. And we start to feel better about ourselves and our power to create change, because we actually do start to see people change, whether it's of their own free will or whether they do it for us. They do start to change, and attitude follows behavior. So I realize we're coming down towards sort of, a time to do Q&A. So I just wanted to summarize, and I hope you can see this slide. It says tips and tools. Summarize the things I've talked about as strategic ways to communicate with non-vegans. First is that
advanced, but that's okay. Anyway,
it hasn't.
There's tips and tools. It came up.
Okay, tips and tools, great, fabulous. It's just
Perfect.
a bit of a lag. So first of all is that 3-step dance. It's so important. This is the 3 steps to shifting people towards veganism. So curiosity, compassion, permission. Next thing available to us when we've got them as far as we can is those vulnerable conversations where we share our internal experience, the impact, and what we would like instead. Then we can move on to requests, which is asking specifically for the behaviors that we need and want from others. And then finally, if we need to, we can set boundaries. And so boundaries can be very scary for a lot of us, but with practice, they can become amazing, because even if a person chooses to take a boundary personally and chooses to think that you're trying to control them, when you uphold that boundary consistently and they see that it is about your integrity, they tend to come around, they tend to respect you, and that relationship tends to actually improve. It goes to another level. Highly recommend using boundaries only as a last resort, in this kind of strategic way if you need to. So I'm just going to pop onto this final slide here. It might take a moment to transition to. This is just some contact details for me. If anyone wants more of this, because I teach the stuff that I've presented here in far greater detail, and I also share a lot of other resources, tips and tools around communicating with non-vegans and living a happy, healthy, and balanced life in a non-vegan world. And I do that primarily in my Facebook group, Unstoppable Vegans. So you can search Facebook if you want and just go Unstoppable Vegans, ask to join. It's a private group. There will be a question asking you to confirm that you are vegan, because it is a safe space. I do not let non-vegans in there. Yeah, you can use either. You can search Facebook directly or use the QR code on the screen to find your way to that group. I've also got my website, theveganmindsetcoach.com. You're welcome to find me on Instagram at The Vegan Mindset Coach. And if you want to connect with me personally on Facebook, I'm just Anita Marriott on my personal profile. So I'll be very, very happy to connect with you all on there and share more resources with you through that forum. I am going to stop sharing screen so that I can see Michelle and we can have a little chat.
Thank you, Anita. That was really great. Really, just listening to all of those wonderful tips and the way that you sort of distilled it down to the basics, but it's still very complex stuff. It really is around, like, our showing up in the world as our best version, is a constant growing, evolving. And we want to remember that we're not done growing ourselves, and how much of the effectiveness or the
Sorry to interrupt, Michelle. Your volume's just dropped right away, up like all the way down to the bottom. If you wouldn't mind just
Okay.
turning it
Yeah, I
back
said we're
up.
having
Thank you. Yeah.
volume
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind
issues
just repeating
today.
the last. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I was just, for me, connecting the dots between communication, not just as words that go, not just the words that go out that we use, but remembering, how self-awareness is so the key, and we can. That's something we can control. We can't control other people or force them to do anything, but we can learn to master, self mastery and self regulation, and remembering our role in talking to non vegans. So that's some of what I'm really taking away from this today. Also, I think that if we do our best not to get triggered, right, it doesn't guarantee that the other person won't get triggered, but it'll make it a whole lot more likely. I think there's something that we mimic one another. So if I'm getting angry, you're more likely to get angry. If I'm more centered, right, and I'm more calm and confident, more likely that will convey itself and that will transfer to you, as we sort of mimic and mirror one another. And so all of those are really important things to remember, to you know, take time to really sort of step back and check back in with that, wherever we are. Um, and I love what you were saying about vulnerability as a strength, really. That vulnerability is really at the heart of rapport building, and really connecting with someone authentically and genuinely is allowing, if we want them to allow themselves to be vulnerable, it starts with us to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. So we are open for questions now. Folks can. Sorry, I'm just noticing the volume and I'm looking at our comment section.
Yeah, it keeps going up and down. That's okay. Thank you for checking.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, Nerds Like Us had a question for you, Anita, which is it a problem that most people see veganism as being morally virtuous instead of a moral obligation?
Yes, I think it is. And I think because they actually do see us as morally virtuous. They see us as superior, and sometimes they see what we do as unattainable. They think that we're some kind of very, very special unicorn snowflake that they could never possibly live up to. And you hear this, you hear it from people who've drifted out of veganism for that reason. They just felt like they could not live up to the expectations and the standards of the other vegans in the community. In fact, I'm actually interviewing a guest expert in my, if you don't mind the plug, within my group Unstoppable Vegans. I'm doing an interview today with a plant power coach. She helps people lose weight through a plant-based diet, but she herself has gone through this journey of actually leaving veganism because she felt so incredibly judged and ostracized, because she thought she was vegan and she was being told that she wasn't doing it right, and she ended up packing it in and backing out. And luckily for her compassion for animals compelled her to come back in and give it another go and succeed the second time around. But yeah, we absolutely see this. People just feel like, if I can't be perfect, then I'm not even going to give it a go. So yes, and they don't. They choose not to see it as an obligation, because if they feel that they can't possibly succeed and yet it's an obligation, well, where does that leave them? So it's easier to see it as a choice.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. I hope that helps. We're open to more questions as we go along so that Anita can continue to hone in on her message and help us all. Maybe you have some examples of situations that have been tough for you. We would certainly welcome hearing those. And I'm wondering, Anita, I know you spoke a little bit about this, but can we assume that at the heart of almost every conversation with non-vegans, when they're so resistant, that guilt a guilty conscience, just feeling bad about their choices, is playing some subconscious role. Is that true for everybody? Is that a universal human thing? And that's why folks go into that cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Can you connect the dots between sort of guilt and our conscience and cognitive dissonance? And is that an automatic human phenomenon that happens when we start to talk about veganism?
I believe it is. I think for the 99% of people who are not psychopaths and who have no empathy and actually take pleasure in hurting others, the rest of us are born with that innate empathy, and we see it with young babies and children in the presence of animals and how they connect and they see them as equals. So we're all born with that, and it is basically trained out of us. In order to allow us to function in a non-vegan world, we have to learn to express that empathy. And the presence of a vegan immediately reminds us that that empathy is there and it's possible, and it starts to just emerge a little bit. It starts to show itself. And then there's the cognitive dissonance. So yes, along with that comes all of that guilt, so much discomfort. And most people don't even understand that they have feelings, and they certainly don't know how to deal with them, how to process them. So one way for them to deal with it is to simply expel the discomfort of that emotion and direct it at the person who they see as the source of that discomfort. That's the level at which they make that connection. So yeah, absolutely, that guilt is actually coming from the fact that they are in fact good people. They do in fact have empathy. Now they've got this pain and they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, so I guess the tip there is if we can keep that in mind, that they're struggling. I mean, the reason they're getting often defensive or projecting onto us or getting angry is that they're having an internal struggle. Like they're literally, their little demons in their mind are sort of popping up, and they're waffling, on that fence, and so they are struggling. So getting in their shoes a little bit is helpful. And we have a question from No, which is, how do you maintain patience with people in your life who are not vegan? So how do you cultivate patience, especially with family and friends now, which is mainly what we're talking about today. We're not talking as much about outreach.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the way to do the patience piece is to keep engaging in that curiosity. So for me, the antidote to the judgment and the contempt and the frustration is really continuing to be curious about why this person is where they are, why they're making the choices that they're making, why they're not listening, why they're pushing back, trying to understand that. So as long as we keep stepping into curiosity, it allows us to step into then empathy to understand this person. Then we feel their pain. So instead of being impatient with them, we actually, we get to feel compassion. Yeah, we get to feel for them, and then we want to help them. That's I think the key to patience is understanding that they are where they are, and then the other thing is remembering where we were. So the vast majority of us were not born vegan, so at some point we became vegan. Prior to that, we were where these people are. So just remembering that and asking ourselves, as the person who was pre-vegan, how would we have wanted other vegans to treat us? Let's do that with this person. This person is just there. We would have wanted patience. They'll want patience. Let's act with compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dr. Melanie Joy talks a lot about keeping in mind our own journey and that we were in their place at one point. We were them before we went vegan. So keeping that in mind from a starting point is often really a good idea. And I'll add to what you said in terms of how to cultivate patience. One thing is to just have very realistic expectations or no expectations. Manage your expectations that nothing dramatic may change in that one conversation, and just there's a difference between having an intention but being detached and being open versus trying to force a particular expectation and just setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Michelle, I think it may be different for different people to, or the level of difficulty to maintain patience may vary depending on your own journey. So if it took you many, many interactions to shift towards veganism, as it did for me, I did not do it overnight. I can refer back to that and be like, you know what, it took me X number of years and it took me so many different exposures. And I can think back to all of those interactions. And then I can put myself back in that place and say, right now, for this person, I am that interaction that I can relate to in my past. I'm that moment. I can show up and just be in that moment, knowing that they will get there if they just keep getting the right kind of interactions, positive interactions where people, yes, are stepping into empathy and rapport with them. So yeah, you mentioned rapport earlier about the mirroring of emotions and so forth. It's so important. So allowing ourselves to step into that curiosity and compassion automatically creates that kind of that mirroring between us. We like them more, they like us more. We know, like, and trust people. When we do that, they are far more willing to see us as someone whose example they want to follow, but also whose information and resources they're willing to accept.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, this is a lifelong, marathon, not a sprint, with them changing as well as each time we can get better and better. And you talked about being non-judgmental. We want to apply that to ourselves as well. Of course, we want to apply that when we're talking to anybody. The idea of not judging is hard for some vegans because clearly, objectively, we were like, they are wrong. They are hurting animals. They are clearly wrong. Of course, there's a right and a wrong. There's two sides here. We're right and they're wrong. And the judgment sort of comes in. And while that certainly we could say it that way, that's not going to foster or serve a conversation to bring judgment. Because whenever I feel judged, whenever you feel judged, we shut down. All it does is shut down and destroy and conversations. So it may seem like an aspirational sort of spiritual, high bar to set to be non-judgmental, but it's something that we absolutely can work on cultivating within ourselves little by little, right? You agree?
Yeah. Absolutely, and towards ourselves. I think you meant that as well. Right? So not just towards the other person, but if we fail to shift that person in that conversation, we can feel like a failure and we can judge ourselves really harsh. It's like, you've screwed that up. You've lost that opportunity. You've done damage. That person's not going to shift. In fact, because you've said something judgmental to them or impatient, they're now going to be even further away from veganism. And so we can blame ourselves. And so, yeah, just remembering that we too are on a journey as vegans. And as we practice these skills, we get better and better. So we can choose to shift our mindset to thinking of it not as this was a failure, but this was an opportunity to learn and get better. And now I'm going to look forward to next time around I have an interaction, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do it differently. This is a continued growth opportunity for me. And I'm going to become an absolute, vegan communication ninja if I just keep practicing these skills. So I'm really looking forward to that next conversation rather than I'm dreading or I never ever want to go out there. I give up. I'm going to stop talking to non-vegans because it's just so frustrating and I'm no good at it. So they're the two different opposing mindsets. So I definitely go with the positive growth mindset. There was the other part to it, which was around oh gosh, the other thing you were saying, and I was going to comment on the judgment towards the other people, and now it's gone out of my head, so I will have to come back later, but that's fine.
Well, I think we really addressed you addressed the idea that being non-judgmental is not the same as being passive. We're not here in any way saying to people be passive. We can be assertive and still be compassionate and non-judgmental. That's the balance to strike. But we have some questions. Okay. Let me read you a question. What is the hardest part when living in a non-vegan world? Oh, this is something you're going to cover even more in depth next week. So
yes,
you can answer it now, of course, but we want them to come back for part 2 as well for more in-depth dive. Do you talk about these things to non-vegans?
Okay, what is the hardest part when living in a non-vegan world? Do you talk about these?
Yes. What is the hardest
Yes.
part when living in a non-vegan world? Do you
Yeah.
actually say
Yeah.
that? Like you were saying, being vulnerable and transparent. Like, this is hard for me. Being in this world is challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Two things in those vulnerable conversations, absolutely. So when we're trying to get someone to understand how we're feeling and the impact it's having on us, definitely. And we do that ideally specifically to the context of what we're talking about in that conversation. What I wouldn't want to do is leading with that when trying to guide other people towards veganism. We don't want to reinforce to them what they already know, that it's hard and it can be distressing. They can see that often we struggle with being vegan in a non-vegan world, and so we don't want to tell them up front about, you're going to find it really hard. Like, you're going to be in dystopia and life's going to suck and you're going to hate people and you'll want the world to end, right? You don't want to lead with that. So it's share it when it's appropriate. It's okay to share it in that compassion step. So if we've listened to them with curiosity and they've said, listen, I'm really scared about being ostracized. I'm worried that I want to do this. I want to go vegan for the animals because I really care. But I'm from this family, very traditional, very meat eating. I don't think they'd understand. I think my mother would have a heart attack. I think they would ostracize and exclude me. I can't face that. That's so scary. So that's a really great place to step into our compassion and share vulnerably about relative or related experiences we might have had, to say, hey, I understand. I too felt like this. This is how my family reacted. This is what I went through. That's an appropriate place to acknowledge that pain, and to share vulnerably about it. So yes, I think it is context dependent, but yeah, we want to be open, particularly if we're talking to the vegans. Sorry, not the vegans. If we're talking to non-vegans who might be giving us a hard time, who might be not wanting to change, that's the opportunity to then share that impact on us, how difficult it is, what is the hardest. And I think the first part of the question was, what is the hardest thing about being vegan in a non-vegan world? And look, I can't tell you your experience. I suspect that for many it is the same as me, which is that everywhere you go, all the time, you're seeing the products of cruelty. Like, even around, it's everywhere. It's, it's in the leather seats in people's cars. It's on their feet. It's on their belts. It's certainly on their plates around you. It's hard to avoid. You go to the movie cinema and, they're consuming non-vegan food around you. So sometimes we just can't, every day we can't avoid being exposed to these things. And as a vegan, as we identify with the animals, the victims, we start to feel victimized by the world around us just through our exposure to everyday products.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me to remind people, we can't say it too much, that don't isolate yourself. It's already isolating enough just naturally being in a non-vegan world. Don't add to that additional isolation to the best of your ability. If you don't already have, you must, almost it's a must prescription, have some vegan friends, if not as many as possible, and a vegan community, in which to immerse yourself, to keep yourself sane and steady and hopeful. So Omar has a question. Anita, what would be a good way to bring up the topic of veganism and communicate effectively about it when you're socializing with a group of non-vegans? Yeah, so when to meet them in the middle or engage? Should we initiate? It's context related, I'm sure, as you said.
Yeah, a good way to bring it up. Okay, so the best way is not to what's the word, walk into the stereotype of, how do you know a vegan? It's, don't worry, they'll come up and tell you straight away. So you do want to be cautious to not start to automatically steer every single conversation and every single interaction towards veganism, because I'm sure you've experienced other people in your life who are just really, really obsessed with a particular topic. And every time you have a conversation with them, they just steer the topic or the conversation towards that one topic that is their primary interest. And if you can remember how, that can become quite let's say, annoying, particularly if you have no real interest in that topic or if you disagree with them on that topic and you'd like to actually engage with them around other topics. So we've got to keep this in mind. We don't want to become that annoying vegan who just constantly just tries to push everything towards veganism. But the way that we raise it, I guess, strategically, is to listen. So again, start with curiosity, spend more time listening than talking, and listen for the opportunities, and then not necessarily take it straight to the animal rights, the animal justice side of things, but to pick up on the pain point. If they're complaining about something in their life, dig further into that, ask them curiosity questions, get them to expand on it, get them to be vulnerable and share, then do that sharing in return, and then offer them something, offer them some information or something that will help. Now, that might not be a vegan resource or link, but it might be something that just opens the gateway, something that they might find helpful. First of all, they will learn to trust you and know that they can feel safe with you and you genuinely care and want to help them. Then they're going to be far more open to being interested in you and how you do things, how you make life work for you, how you get to be so fit and healthy, whatever it might be. And I know that not all of us are super fit and healthy just because we're vegan. That's another topic. But I very much do advocate that we do the best to be as fit and healthy, both physically and emotionally, as possible, so that we get to be that beacon for the non-vegans who are struggling with their health, physical, emotional, and so forth. If they can look at us and say, how do you look so young for our age? How are you so fit? How are you doing all this incredible activity that you do? How do you have so much energy? How do you, live with such great balance despite being a vegan and in such a minority? Then we'll have the answers for them, and then they'll look to us as someone who they could possibly follow. So that's how I suggest doing it. Doing it subtly, connecting with them around what matters to them, and then dropping hints and clues and little breadcrumbs to lead them along that way. Eventually, they will want to have the full-on conversation with you. Eventually, they'll be open to that, and you get to have the let's talk about the animals. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I'm so glad you brought up the term pain point again as it relates to this, because you're right. People are coming from a perspective of what's in it for me. And often we can help people see in terms of veganism what's in it for them by showing or explaining a little bit about how different issues or how they're out of alignment, and that might be their pain point, and where veganism might fill that, help them to live more in alignment, more with their values, as well as improve their health, as well as improve the lives of animals and the planet. So, and there are some vegans who actually embrace their annoyingness, right? We all sort of know one. Maybe we try not to be that person, and sometimes we just let our annoyingness fly. And sometimes too, we're going to be that irritating, annoying vegan, hashtag annoying vegan, kind of thing. But let's see. So we have another question from No, which is, when do you think it's time to give up on people who don't seem convinced by veganism, even if they are plant-based? So when, and is it ever, or when is it appropriate to walk away?
When is it time to walk? It's whenever you decide that you want to walk away. It's go with the gut, because once you've got to the point where you don't believe this person is for the moving, or you feel like you've tried everything that you're willing to try, then it becomes futile. Then at that point, that's when you start to get frustrated and pushing, and you become counterproductive. So it's like when you've got to the point where like, I've invested enough time and energy in this person, they've got this far. If they're going to make the rest of the journey, it'll be under someone else's influence. And often that is the case. maybe we're just not the person that is the right person to inspire them. It might be, somebody who is they see as a role model in a different way. Someone, it might be a celebrity, or it might be someone they see as a wise elder, perhaps. But we might just not be that person for them. So I'd say, never give up. Never just decide that they'll never change, but you can absolutely decide that you've taken them as far as you can or are willing to. When you're finding that your investment of time and energy in that person is greater than you're happy to give, and you could be investing that elsewhere to make a greater difference, that's the time to walk away.
Nice. Yeah, and we're welcoming tips from you guys out there too, because Anita's very smart. I'm kind of smart, but you guys are smart too and have lots of experience, especially for new vegans out there. Go ahead and put in the comments any of your tips or different experiences you've had where maybe you were just about to give up, or you felt like you had given up, and surprise, surprise, right after that, someone said to them, you know what, I've been listening to you. I'm going to go vegan. You just never know. You never know when that's going to happen.
And I must say that along my journey, I met, before I was vegan, I met several vegans along the way who are only in my life possibly for a matter of days or weeks, who never knew that I ended up becoming vegan. They had no idea. They just, I asked them some questions, and they were kind enough to answer those questions and share their experience with me. And every one of those interactions helped me to shift along that path. So as I said, I had many of these interactions. They will never know. So they might have thought that they failed with me. And hopefully they didn't think that. So just remember that as you have those conversations and you walk away and it might seem like that person hasn't shifted even a tiny bit, chances are they're going to take away what you shared and the questions you asked them maybe in return, and they're going to digest them. And the breakthrough very often happens after the conversation. So I can promise you that as a life coach, it's very common that something I might flag or raise or ask within a coaching session, the person might dismiss in that moment. It might not seem relevant. And then they'll email me like during the week and say, hey, you know what, I thought further about it, and that's actually the key. Now that I've thought about it, that's unlocked everything for me. And that will happen with those conversations. So trust that you're having an impact, even if it feels like it was a complete fail of a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's redundant. Maybe it's not, but we're planting seeds. Just keep planting seeds. And in the meantime, take really good care of yourself. Yeah. So we're going to wrap up in shortly. Shortly, we're going to be wrapping up. But if there is one more question, we'll welcome that question. But maybe while we're waiting, see if there's any more questions, Anita. Do you want to give people a glimpse, a little preview of next week, where our topic is going to be managing dystopia? You want to talk a little bit about what that will bring to people?
Sure. Absolutely. So what I will do broadly, again, I'll start with the key ways in which it manifests in our lives. So this is the anguish of being vegan in a non-vegan world, the impact that it has on us. We might not be aware of some of these impacts, so just being aware of them is really important. And then I'll go through one by one the things that we need to address in order to ease those impacts of dystopia and help us to basically start to see the world as one that is full of potential, and to, I guess, create that belief that a vegan world is possible. So that's a bit of a clue, because I've come across far too many vegans who, even though they're in the daily grind, they're in the activism, they're doing their best, secretly they don't, or not even secretly, sometimes overtly, they actually don't believe that a vegan world is even possible. So they don't have a clear and compelling vision for that. What that manifests in is when they do their activism, their engagement, their advocacy, it comes through. It comes through in the way that they present this underlying belief that it's all futile in the end. It doesn't lead to very effective, I guess, communication and to shifting people towards that. So a big piece of what I'm going to talk about is learning to believe that a vegan world is possible eventually, and creating that vision of a vegan world for ourselves, and then living into it. Living as if it's inevitable, behaving in that way, it changes who we are, how we present, the way that we experience the world as full of potential rather than just full of horror. So I hope that helps.
No, it's so important. It's so important. And you're right, futility, we don't want to get into that place where we feel like this is futile, my actions don't make a difference, because that's one of the biggest obstacles in our movement, and individually as well. So I hope people will tune in again next week, a week from today, same time, where Anita will be diving into how to manage dystopia. And I don't think we have any other questions. So Anita, do you have any final points or final words? And also certainly we want you to share how folks can reach you and any announcements. I think you have a Facebook group.
Yes. So what I can do, I can just share that slide again, the one that I shared at the end.
Maybe we could put it in the comments.
Oh, we can do that too. Yeah, I can just pop it up while I talk. There we go. There we go. So yeah, so I've got this Facebook group called Unstoppable Vegan. So I've created it as a safe space for us. And what it's really focused on is giving us the tools and skills to manage our mind and our emotions around being vegan in a non-vegan world, so that we can be well adjusted and relate to people in a healthy way. And I do so much on communication, on communicating with non-vegans. So as I said earlier, the stuff I shared today, I go much, much deeper in this group. And so in this group, I do a weekly live training, which is also recorded into the group. So you can go back and watch those videos anytime on these topics. And I also give out free resources. So such as I've got a communication guide, how to communicate with non-vegans so they actually hear you, and a few other resources. I've got a template for vulnerable conversation and so forth. So I very much invite people to come and check out the group, come and join us, get those free trainings and resources, and also the support of that community. You mentioned, Michelle, it's really important to have vegan friends. It's awesome to have at least a few good vegan friends in real life, people you can hug and hold and meet up with. But it's also great to have that more extended online community to share tips and resources and help and support. So that's what I'm aiming to create with my group. And I know there are other vegan groups out there that are there about that peer and community support. Where I try to take it a step further is I give that real structured skill building around how to live a happier, more connected and more impactful life as a vegan. So within that group, I will also run, I'll run little challenges. So I'll do like a 5 days of intensive training where you get to turn up once a day for 5 days for 1 hour. And I teach you a real core skill that you then get to practice for the next 24 hours. And then each day we build on that so that you get to really improve in a particular area of, let's say, communication or relating to non-vegans to really improve your effectiveness by the end of that. So I run those as well within the group. And then next challenge, communication challenge I'm running is going to be starting on the 17th of November. So you do need to be in the Unstoppable Vegans group to find out about the details and to sign up for that. So very much invite people to come and join me in there. So I'll stop sharing that now. There we go.
All right. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Good. So I hope that folks will certainly follow you on social media and get into your Facebook group, and that they will join us next week as well. I think that folks out there, if you have a takeaway, go ahead and put that in the comment section, what you're taking away, what you're going to make actionable in your life, how you might approach your conversations with non-vegans a little bit differently from this point. And I am going to look to wrap up. Before I wrap up, I want to recommend So this book it's called Out of Sight, and Gail Eisnitz is the author. It's a really compelling and powerful book. It's about an undercover investigator's fight for animal rights and her own survival. So you may have seen Gail as a guest on a few other podcasts, animal rights podcasts recently, and she's a great guest, and she's got a really important message. There's a wonderful testimonial here from Jane Goodall, who we love, saying how wonderful this book is. So just maybe something to consider getting, and then join us when Gail is here with us on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks on the 21st, actually. So then to wrap up, first of all, thank you, Anita. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate your time and being here, given that you're in Australia and it's early in the morning there. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that you're with us, and you'll be here again next week. As we wrap up, for as little as $2 a month, please consider becoming a patron by finding AAC on Patreon. Your donations allow AAC to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee or want to get involved, please visit our website, animalactivismcollective.com. Please hit subscribe while you're here on our channel and give us a like. And my final message is about urgency. Change isn't out there. Change starts with us. Go out there tomorrow and show your compassion boldly, without hesitation or delay. The animals don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to care enough to try. So until next time, thank you everyone for being here. AAC signing off.